Good morning, Team Alabama. We are going to work a little bit more in Anne Frank. Please go ahead and turn in your books to page 536, Anne Frank. So remember, Meep is just getting to the attic, and they've just caught Mr. Van Dan stealing the food. And so everybody's been up in arms over this, and Mrs. Frank basically lost it. And she just kind of went a little nuts on him. So Mr. Frank says, "I beg you, don't let her see a thing like this." He's like, "We're all freaking out. You need to calm down. Don't let Meep see us like this." Mr. Dussel, Anne, Peter, Mrs. Van Dan, Mr. Van Dan, myself, and he's still counting out the potatoes, the rotten potatoes, to split the food up. Margot to Dussel, "Stop it, stop it." Dussel, Mr. Frank, Margot, Anne, Peter, Mrs. Van Dan, Mr. Van Dan, myself, Mrs. Frank. So he keeps counting out these potatoes. And he's annoying as usual. So, Mrs. Van Dan, "You're keeping the big ones for yourself, all the big ones. Look at the size of that and that." Dussel continues on with his dividing. Peter, with his shirt and trousers on, comes from his room. Margot says, "Stop it, stop it." We hear Meep's excited voice speaking to Mr. Frank below. "Mr. Frank, the most wonderful news. The invasion has begun." Mr. Frank, "Go on, tell them, tell them." Meep comes running up the steps ahead of Mr. Frank. She has a man's raincoat on over her night clothes and a bunch of orange-colored flowers in her hand. "Did you hear that, everybody? Did you hear what I said? The invasion has begun, the invasion." They all stare at Meep, unable to grasp what she is telling them. Peter is the first to recover his wits. "Where? When? When, Meep?" "It began early this morning," and as she talks on, the realization of what she has said begins to dawn on them, and everyone goes crazy. A wild demonstration takes place. Mrs. Frank hugs Mr. Van Dan. Okay, get that again. Mrs. Frank hugs Mr. Van Dan. Remember, she was just going nuts on him for stealing. And she hugs him. "Oh, Mr. Van Dan, did you hear that?" Dussel embraces Mrs. Van Dan. Peter grabs a frying pan and parades around the room, beating on it, singing the Dutch national anthem. Anne and Margot follow him, singing, weaving in and out among the excited grown-ups. Margot breaks away and takes the flour from Meep and distributes them to everyone. While this pandemonium is going on, Mrs. Frank tries to make herself heard above the excitement. Okay, add pandemonium to your vocab, and it's a wild kind of celebration, a loud, big, wild celebration. And maybe we can ask ourselves some questions at this time from what we know. Do the Franks get saved? Does the invasion stop Hitler? What happens with Dussel, and actually what happens with Mr. Van Dan? Do they still put him out? Does Peter leave? What happens next? Okay, think of some questions that you can add, and add those to your vocab and your questions area. Okay, top of page 536, Mrs. Frank to Meep. "How do you know? The radio, the BBC, they said they landed on the coast of Normandy. The British, Americans, French, Dutch, Poles, Norwegians, all of them. More than 4,000 ships. Churchill spoke, and General Eisenhower, D-Day they called it. Thank God it's come at last. I'm going to tell Mr. Kraler this'll be better than any blood transfusion. What part of Normandy did they land? Did they say? Normandy, that's all I know. I'll be up in a minute when I hear some more."